Hey, welcome back, another video. Here's what I watched in January 2024. I started off the year with Rope 1948, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and I fucking loved it. It's just a great distillation of why fascism is inherently warped and evil. I'm surprised more isn't said about how anti-fascist this film truly is. Certainly there's a lot to be said about the homoerotic subtext of the film, but not nearly enough discussing what the film says about the murderous act itself and the inhumane line of thinking that's caused it. And it's Alfred Hitchcock, so it's great. It looks great. It's an amazing movie, really. It might even be one of my favorites, or I don't know, Rear Window might be my favorite, but still 10 out of 10, honestly. And I don't hand those out very often. I'm very surprised at how much I love this. Then I watched Stream Scenario in cinemas, and I really love the off putting editing style. It's not as funny as I thought it would be, because it was more part drama. I didn't like that it came up with logic for the dreams and then what was done with that. It also had, surprisingly, sort of a downer ending. Yeah, but I still thought this was really good and very interesting and made me go, yep, that's what would happen. 8 out of 10. Then I watched the much maligned Saltburn, and yeah, it seems to be a very love it or hate it, and to me it wasn't really either. It looks nice, but the 4x3 framing didn't really work for it. I don't know. It could have been something special or could have been actual satire, but just doesn't provide a whole lot to chew on aside from the shock value, which I do think is kind of well done. I have no idea how self aware this really is. Some of it is pretty campy, and I think you're meant to laugh at, and some of it I'm just like, am I meant to find this funny? I'm not sure. But I don't know. It's trashy, but still pretty entertaining. Probably like a 6 out of 10. Then I watched The Insider, directed by Michael Mann, and it's got a great script, a stellar cast, but Michael Mann is really what makes this movie as good as it is, and God, it looks good. Yeah, don't have a lot to say about this, but I really, really liked it. 9 out of 10. Then I watched Michael Mann's Miami Vice 2006. I watched the theatrical cut of the film. Full disclosure, I had a headache while watching it, and that may have affected my viewing experience. The early digital aesthetic is very essential to this movie and makes it what it is, even in the technology the characters use. It's a 2006 time capsule. Sometimes it looks kind of off-putting, but overall I like the look of this. Colin Farrell could not mask his Irish accent at all, and it was pretty funny at times. It kind of dragged in the middle, and it took a while for the characters to grow on me, but I really enjoyed it by the time we got to the third act. It's strange and alienating and unlike anything I've seen before, and I could see it growing on me over time. For now, though, I think I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Then I watched When Evil Lurks, a mean, lean horror movie, clearly inspired by the Evil Dead movies, but just without the comedy. Includes stuff you don't see in most horror movies, like children and dogs dying, and it's pretty effective. I wish I saw it in cinemas and got that cinema reaction. It's got a pretty bad representation of autism in the film, and there were some weird plot elements that could have used some more explanation, or maybe the character's just stupid, I don't know. But still, I really like the horror elements in this, 7.5 out of 10. Then, immediately after, I watched Messiah of Evil, and I expected a cheesy, fun horror movie, but turns out this is pretty dark and nihilistic. Makes for a solid pairing with When Evil Lurks, though. It also looks just incredible and really colourful. It did take a while for it to grow on me, but by the end, I really liked it. 7.5 out of 10. Then I watched No Hard Feelings, and I wish I liked this more than I did. Our leads here are very good, but I think the script lets them down a lot and just doesn't come to its full potential. This is also one of the flattest looking movies I've ever seen. People complained that Bottoms looked flat, but this shit just looks worse than most commercials. There is absolutely nothing to this movie visually. It's watchable, but I didn't really get much out of it. 5 out of 10. Then I watched Ferrari, directed by Michael Mann, and it's just a really solid movie that I don't really have all that much to say about. I have trouble understanding the accent sometimes. Seriously, what the fuck are these people saying? Why can't Italians just speak normal? That's my question. But yeah, 8 out of 10, I think. Then I watched Mayhem, and again, I really wanted to like this. Joe Lynch seems cool, and I really liked his Venom fan film, but I did not like this. His directing isn't the problem here, though. You can feel that there's passion behind the camera. What lets it down is the unfunny dialogue, and it's just far too ambitious for its budget. Would have been served better if it took place in a small location with less characters and had more money going towards gore gags, which is really what this movie needed, and I'm sure is what Lynch wanted to do. I mean, why else would you make a movie like this, let's be honest? I'm excited to finally check out Suitable Flesh, though. But this, didn't like it, 4 out of 10. Then I watched Rocky 2, and I don't know, I might like this better than the first. It's kind of the same movie again, and Apollo Creed isn't given anything to do except be mad at Rocky. But, Rocky and Adrian are put in a different position this time around, which helps make the stakes feel higher. It's really well directed, and the boxing match at the end was riveting and left the movie on a high note. 8, maybe even 8.5 out of 10. Then I watched Certain Women, directed by Kelly Reichardt and starring Lily Gladstone. And, wow, great movie. I loved it way more than I expected. It just feels so natural, like you're watching people's lives, which I know you can say about a lot of movies, but I don't know, it just hit me different this time around. Lily Gladstone is excellent in it and gives what's probably my favorite performance in the whole film. This makes me want to see more from Kelly Reichardt. 9 out of 10. Then I watched Galaxy Quest, and it's much better than it should be. Just comes together very well. The CGI has aged very poorly, which I know is to be expected for a comedy movie from 1999, but I think it would have been better served if they relied more on practical effects, even if they looked kind of fake and cheesy, but it would have fit the theme of the movie. Anyway, this is like Guardians of the Galaxy before we got Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's very good. 7 or 7.5 out of 10. Then I watched Maestro, and I expected this to be a pretty by the numbers biopic, but it was a lot weirder than I expected, with a lot of bold creative choices. It's pretty unconventional. Out of all the biopics I've seen, it reminded me most of Blonde. Unfortunately, like Blonde, although it's near perfect on a technical level, it just doesn't quite come together in a way that is emotionally investing or satisfying. Did I learn anything about Leonard Bernstein? I don't think so. It's a bold effort, and I respect Bradley Cooper for really putting his all in this, but I can't say I liked it. 5.5 out of 10. It's almost a pass, but just doesn't quite get there for me. Then I watched the Marvel miniseries Echo, and I'm just counting this because, let's be honest, this is basically a movie. It's fine, it suffers from the usual Marvel show problems. It really only had enough story to be a movie. The finale is just typical superhero schlock, and is easily the weakest episode, and you can tell it was heavily altered in the editing room. I'm 100% sure making it TVMA was a post-production decision to try and appeal to fans of Daredevil. Speaking of Daredevil, they waste him by putting him in only one scene in the first episode. That said, it's not bad. I like the cast, and there are some really cool action scenes. It's just so Marvel though. And I'm kind of sick of how they all have the same look and feel. 6 out of 10. Then I watched Crank 2 High Voltage, and this barely even registers as a movie. It's more like a feature-length shitpost. It's extremely vulgar, extremely racist, sexist, borderline pornographic, and nihilistic. I was insane the whole way though. I don't know how this got made and fucking distributed by Lionsgate. That's just insane to me. There are a few not so entertaining scenes where Statham isn't present. While I like this one more, that's one area where Crank 1 is better. Because Statham is in every scene, and he needs to be. Because the scenes without him, although not many, feel like they go on for a really long time. But yeah, overall, I don't even know how to rate this. I simultaneously hate it and love it. 6.5 out of 10, I guess. Then I watched Election, directed by Alexander Payne. And for the whole movie, I was sort of like, what's the point of this? Why is this all happening? Where is this going? And then the ending happened, and I was like, oh, I get it. Yeah, it's pretty fun, pretty entertaining. Nothing life changing, though. 8 out of 10. Then I watched The Holdovers. And yeah, it's a little cheesy at points, with it hitting some story beats we've seen in plenty of movies like this before. But it's still very good. I don't really have much to say about it. 8, maybe 8.5 out of 10. Then I rewatched Poor Things in 35mm. Just a flex, really. Just showing that off. And yeah, I still think it's great. 9 out of 10. Then I watched Rocky 3, and this is where these movies enter a heightened reality. Mr. T just plays the cartoon character. Maybe the most one-dimensional villain in cinematic history, but somehow it kind of works for this movie. I like that Apollo Creed gets more fleshed out, and Carl Weathers is of course great. Rest in peace. And yeah, it's just a very entertaining, very likable movie, and also kind of gay at points. 8 out of 10. Then I watched Rocky 4, and I watched the theatrical cut, and this movie is so stupid and is borderline a betrayal of the Rocky series, but it's fun as hell. 6.5 out of 10. Then I watched The Virgin Suicides, directed by Sofia Coppola, and I really loved it. Despite the heavy subject matter, a lot of the film is quite sweet and comforting and at times funny, but the way the suicides, and I don't consider that a spoiler because it's in the title, are presented in the film is so shockingly disturbing. It shows suicide in a way that takes the audience off guard, and it's horrifying, which most other films tends to shy away from when approaching the subject matter. The film being told from a male perspective seems to be a point of contention with a lot of people, but I think just pointing that out and saying it's bad is a pretty surface level way of looking at it. Everyone in the film, the boys, their parents, treat the girls as objects of desire. No one makes any effort to understand them or see them as human beings. They're more seen as decorations, and that's very intentional. The film leaves you wishing you knew more about them, just as the boys wish they all did in hindsight. 9 out of 10. I really loved it. Then I watched Rocky 5, which is considered by most to be the worst Rocky movie by a landslide, and I mostly enjoyed it, to be honest. It tries to take back the series to its roots as a grounded drama about a normal working class guy. I think that mostly works here. The movie is, while still kind of messy in parts, honestly pretty good up until the final fight, which is awful and feels way too over the top for what this movie was up until that point, and it leaves a sour taste in your mouth. I think that scene alone is why people really don't like that movie, and yeah, it's not a good note for the film to end on. Also, the soundtrack, terrible. Still, overall, I think this movie gets past. The relationship between Rocky and his family, particularly his son, is what saves it for me. I mean, it's alright. 6 out of 10. Then I watched Marie Antoinette, and it took me a while to settle into this. I kind of wish it leaned more into the modern, subversive style, like with the dialogue. Aside from the needle drops, the only one modern thing in this film is a pair of Converse shoes. I wanted it to be more purposely inaccurate, but I don't know, that would have been fun. Still, as it stands, this movie is still very, very good. 8 out of 10. Then I watched Solaris in cinemas, and I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I didn't love it. I mean, it looks gorgeous, but it just didn't lean much into the sci-fi genre, despite the majority of the runtime taking place on a spaceship. I thought the themes of the movie were just better explored in films such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, which predates this, and also later on Blade Runner. Maybe I didn't get it, and I'll rewatch it in a few years and go, holy shit, this is a masterpiece, why did I ever not love this? But 6 or 6.5 out of 10 for now. I'm interested in seeing the Steven Soderbergh remake, which some consider to be the superior film. So, yeah. Then I watched Pitch Black, and it's corny and dated, but it's a pretty fun time. I wish it leaned more into being a horror movie. Probably a 6.5 out of 10. Very close to giving it a 7, but yeah, 6.5. Then I watched The Iron Claw, and yeah, I cried. And this isn't trying to make me sound macho or anything, but just I hardly ever cry at movies. I don't know why. Like I'm just emotionally detached from most movies for some reason. But this really got to me. The only complaint is that I don't think the female characters got quite enough development. But honestly, I really, really love this. 9.5 out of 10. Also, this doesn't affect my rating, but the decision to leave out the brother Chris Von Erich was kind of weird. I don't know if Kevin Von Erich had consulted in this decision, but I don't know. It's pretty shocking to learn there was yet another brother of the family who tragically died and yet wasn't included. I don't know, it's odd. Then I watched The Chronicles of Riddick Dark Fury, which is an animated short film taking place between Pitch Black and Chronicles of Riddick. Yeah, I just decided I'd get into Riddick movies for some reason. It reminded me a decent amount of a section from The Animatrix, even directed by a guy who did one of the shorts in The Animatrix. And one of the scenes specifically looks like the Love, Death, and Robots episode is Zima Blue. And what do you know? The director of that, Robert Valley, was a key animator on this. But yeah, this is pretty fun. 6.5 out of 10. Then I watched The Chronicles of Riddick. Turns out these movies have so much fucking convoluted lore, and I honestly didn't know what was happening half the time, but I respect the hell out of it and David Toohey and the writers for just taking Pitch Black and turning it into their own complicated Dune-style universe. The CGI is pretty terrible most of the time. I didn't like that it was PG-13, and I watched the director's cut of this, and that still feels like it's PG-13. I did end up really enjoying the third act of the film, though. 6 out of 10, I think. Then I watched Riddick, and yeah, I watched the extended cut for this. This one feels more like a back to basics movie that feels much more in line with Pitch Black. There's hardly any lore or anything, it's just another survival movie like the first one. It does kind of feel held back in that way. Would have liked to see it expand more on the lore and the universe. That's what I liked most about the last one. But I appreciated that this was rated R. The amount of references to sexual assault was kind of weird. Even Riddick has a few really creepy lines. Overall, though, it's pretty fun, but nothing remarkable. 6 out of 10. So, with that, Pitch Black is the best, in my opinion, but Chronicles of Riddick is probably my favorite in that it's most interesting, just in how weird it is. Then I watched The Beekeeper, and yep, it's a January movie. Some of the dialogue is terrible in trying to sound cool and hip. It was funny when a guy offered Jason Statham an NFT in exchange for his life, though. Action is pretty good, but nothing spectacular. It's not like John Wick level at all. For how stupid this movie is, I appreciated that it always took itself super seriously. It's never winking at the audience. 6 or 6.5 out of 10. Then I watched Singing in the Rain for the first time, believe it or not, and yeah, it's amazing. God, Technicolor looks so cool. It's very funny and clever. Damien Chazelle shamelessly took from this when making Babylon, like, damn. There were some parts during the musical scenes where I was just left going, how the hell did they do this? It's a bit dated in parts, which is to be expected, although I wasn't a fan of how Lena Lamont was a villain, purely because she had a coarse sounding voice. Thought that was gonna go somewhere more interesting with her realizing she doesn't sound good when doing talkies, and she starts losing her star power, but that's just not where it went at all. Still, that's a relatively minor complaint. 9.5 out of 10. Then I watched Priscilla, and it's very good. Really well written, and the leads were great. It depicted the relationship in a way where it felt very compelling and interesting. I didn't like how it looked. It was well shot, but it was just so desaturated it kind of looked like a commercial. It ended very abruptly, and I feel like it could have gone on for much longer and explored more from that point. But still, it's good. 7, maybe 7.5 out of 10. Then I watched Tron for the first time, despite watching Tron Legacy a bunch as a kid. Insane movie made by an insane nerd. You can really see it in the movie how far this pushed technology though, and how it was doing things at the time that probably seemed unthinkable. It blends together so many techniques, like obviously using CGI, which is what it's known for, but also being shot on 70mm black and white film, and having the extreme amounts of backlight animation and compositing. There's matte paintings, and there's even hand-drawn animation at one point. It's a really impressive blend of techniques that you can tell took so much work. The problem is, once this movie goes into the Tron world, it kind of becomes much worse compared to real life scenes. It just goes on and becomes more and more alienating because it's such a weird, complicated, and nerdy world, and it's not an aesthetic you can really get used to. It really needed a B plot with the supporting characters in the real world doing something. That would have made this movie a lot better. Still, it's pretty good, 6.5 out of 10. Also, Pac Man's in it. Is that like the first fan servicey Easter egg in a movie? Then I watched Tron Legacy in IMAX 3D, and yeah, it looks gorgeous. The Daft Punk score is incredible. The lead is kinda bland, but it doesn't impede that much on the movie. And the de-aging has aged very poorly, but like the first Tron, this use of CGI was pretty groundbreaking at the time. But the first clear shot of de-aged Jeff Bridges just made the audience laugh, which is pretty funny. I watched this movie a lot as a kid, and I have more of an appreciation for it now after watching the first Tron and seeing how it builds upon the designs and aesthetics of that movie. And yeah, it's just a childhood favorite, and I really like it. 8 out of 10. Maybe that's too high. I don't know. Then I watched Avatar: The Way of Water in IMAX 3D, and man, I like this movie more and more each time I watch it. All the complaints I had about it just sort of minimize each time I rewatch it. I was just sucked into it, and I completely forgot that Sigourney Weaver plays a teenager in this. It just completely slipped my mind. But yeah, I really love this. It's got a really great third act. I mean, James Cameron, man, he's the best at what he does. 9 out of 10. Then I watched Elemental, and I liked it. It took a while to grow on me, and the plot surrounding water leaking into the city was boring, and I can't imagine kids would have any interest in that or even understand what's going on, really. The race metaphor stuff is kind of a mess, but I think it's better than something like Zootopia because the movie isn't about racism, it's just more about different cultures. But if someone takes offense to it, I'm not going to argue that they're wrong. What made me like it though, aside from the animation, which of course looked gorgeous, was the main romance. We haven't had a Western romance animated movie for over a decade, so it's nice to get one again. And yeah, it was cute. The movie didn't live up to its full potential, but I don't know, I still quite enjoyed it. 6.5 out of 10. Then I watched Rocky Balboa, and I don't know, man. This movie didn't know what it wanted to be. It's simultaneously made to be the final, most emotional chapter in the Rocky saga, while also just repeating what the other Rocky movies have already done, and not doing anything particularly interesting thematically or story wise. They kill off Adrian off screen, which I hate. If they wanted to have her die, fine, but having it off screen in between movies just feels like a massive disservice to her character. I can't help but feel the movie would have been much better with her in it. Overall, I just don't think Stallone came up with a good enough idea to bring the Rocky series back. It's not doing anything new, even if it's not necessarily a bad movie. 5.5 out of 10. Then I watched Infinity Pool, and I watched the NC-17 version, and I liked it a lot. It's got a really great concept, which I don't really want to get into because I just really went into this blind, and I think that's the best. I really love Alexander Skarsgård in this. He felt very natural in this very unnatural movie. I like how it delved into Brandon Cronenberg's own insecurities as an artist, especially coming off of his father's footsteps. I almost wish it got into that more, in a way that was more unflinching and honest. I don't really understand the complaint that this is just a rich people bad movie, which is just copying movies like Knives Out and Parasites. I think the elements of class explored in this were very subtle, and it was secondary to exploring the protagonist's view of himself as an artist. I wasn't a fan of the unsaturated look of the movie, And most of the shocking elements made sense thematically, but there were one or two shocking moments in the movie where I was just like, is this just shocking because this movie feels like it has to be because it's, Cronenberg? But I don't know. Still, I really liked it. 8 out of 10. Then I watched Polite Society. Okay, they're good. The cast is very solid, especially the main leads, and they were both very likable, and that made the movie pretty enjoyable to watch. It's pretty fun, and also the dramatic scenes worked surprisingly well. The bad. It's an action comedy, and it's not funny, and the action is pretty bad. This is clearly inspired by Edgar Wright movies, but just doesn't have the budget that those movies had to bring the vision to life. The story is a mess, and it doesn't fit the tone of what this is going for at all. There are events alluded to in this movie that are pretty gross and disturbing, but the movie never acknowledges that properly because it's trying to maintain a fun, Edgar Wright type vibe throughout. Anyway, yeah, I didn't hate watching it, but it's just not particularly great. 5 out of 10. Anyway, yeah, that's what I watched this month. See you next whenever for what I watched in February. Alright, bye.